Strange homemade 22 caliber projectiles. Now there's a whole bunch of videos here of people shooting strange things out of 12 gauge shotguns, making their own shotgun shells, but not everyone owns a shotgun. But pretty much everyone at one point or another has owned a 22, so I decided to take it upon myself to think of some weird and strange things you could shoot out of a 22. Now a lot of my ideas, if you could call it that, basically use a wax sabot. A sabot is something that fits over a smaller diameter projectile so it can be fired out of a larger caliber gun. Alright. But let me start off with something that's very easy to visualize, the homemade Super Calibri. Now, what's a Super Calibri? If you don't know, it's this really cool round you can get from Italy. It's got a lightened down 22 bullet on a normal 22 long rifle cartridge case. It has basically no powder in it. It just has a beefed up primer. So it has just enough power to bring the bullet down range, but the real advantage of using this round is that the report is so quiet most people mistake it with a pellet gun. So you could basically shoot a 22 in a heavily populated area and no one gets worried. Well, a lot of people say, instead of me having to hunt down this rare and expensive round, how about I just pull a bullet off a normal 22, empty the powder out, and use the primer? Doesn't really work. The problem is it just doesn't have enough power. So I said, how about we replace the gunpowder with flash powder? Now, you get some Armstrong's mix. If you don't know what that is, I put a video up here about reloading 22s not too long ago. And the idea behind it is that, you make your own primer by using Armstrong's mix. And there's a few different ways to make Armstrong's mix. The easiest thing to do is just buy a whole bunch of cap gun caps. Take the powder out, pour it in the cartridge, and if you want a little bit extra power, what you can do is kind of mix the powder first with isopropyl rubbing alcohol and then pour it into the cartridge and let it solidify. You just want to seat the bullet back on top, and this is all just a hypothetical, but theoretically this bullet now might be able to have enough power to shoot the bullet down range, and it still be quiet enough that most people will mistake it with a pellet gun. I don't know, just an idea. Now the next type of round I have here is the Joe Biden special. Now, our Vice President Joe Biden had a letter from a kid. The kid said, too bad bullets aren't made out of chocolate. And Joe Biden replied, oh yes, if bullets are made out of chocolate, people will be happy and smile and all the other good stuff. It turns out that chocolate bullets still are actually quite lethal. So, if you have a 22 bullet mold laying around, you can mold out a 22 bullet and just seat it on top of your cartridge. And that's one way to make a Joe Biden special. The other way is just to get yourself some conventional, cooking chocolate. And push the chocolate down into the mouth of your cartridge into some sort of little, chocolate slug. And there you go. Those are the Joe Biden special bullets. Now, the next type of round I have here, I call this one the nail driver. Basically what it is you get yourself a thumbtack, you crack the plastic off, and you're left with this little tiny nail, smaller than a finish nail. It's made out of a light grade steel. It's usually also nickel plated. It's just a pretty decent projectile, even though it doesn't have much mass to it. And you just encase it in conventional canning wax. And there you go. That's the nail driver. It probably will keyhole all over the place, but it's still an interesting idea. Now the next round I have, this one I call the screwdriver. Basically we're going up from technology now, from nails to screws. It's just a little tiny number 2 wood screw. It's basically one of the small screws you can find and one of the few that will fit into the mouth of a 22 cartridge. You want to take this screw, which keep in mind now is made out of a mild grade tool steel. It's also got a zinc galvanized finish, and encase it in wax. Now it still has the probability of keyholing, but it has a little bit more mass to it, so it should be able to leave a little bit more dent into what you're shooting than a nail. Now the next type of round, this is the flathead. Basically what it is that same number 2 wood screw, just positioned backwards. So if it doesn't keyhole, it'll be able to deliver more of its mass in a thrusting blow. And in a way it kind of has a shape a little bit like a hollow point, so we'll be interested to see what exactly it could do. Now the next round I have here, once again still using hardware, I call this one the Ring of Fire. What is it? It's a 4mm metric hex nut. You can find these things usually in electronics applications. Once again, it's a mild grade tool steel with a zinc galvanized finish usually. But the idea is that, you ever see these projectiles the police use for, their less than lethal applications of their shotguns? It's usually a ring made out of plastic. So perhaps this light wax encased, metal ring could be used on varmints and other small game as a less than lethal projectile. I don't know, it's just an idea I had. Now this next round I have here, this one once again still is in the realm of hardware. It's just something that I've always noticed. If you've ever seen a set screw in a hardware store, don't they kind of remind you of a 22 caliber bullet, even just a little bit? I mean, they're available in so many different types of materials now. You have steel, you have painted materials, you have plastic like nylon, and you also have brass, which makes it look even more like a 22 bullet. So I said, with all the different varieties and kinds of set screws, I mean, you could kind of choose. It's just like reloading with real bullets. You could just take, whatever set screw you can, kind of fit it into the mouth of your 22 and fire it off that way. Now, this next round I have here, This is the vampire killer. What am I talking about? Well, the old theory is that you could drive a wooden stake through the heart of a vampire, you can kill him. Well, you can take a 3/16 wooden dowel, trim it to length, encase it in wax again, and fire it out of a 22. Is it going to be able to kill a vampire? Probably not. It'll probably just make a bunch of splinters. But if you want to step it up a notch, you can get yourself a bamboo skewer. Now, those things already got a nice pointed tip on them, and in so many ways, bamboo is actually stronger than metal, so you might have something there. This next round, this is called the Bad Fisherman. Now, I went down to a sporting goods store, and I looked one day at some of this BB split shot, and I had the thought, man, you know, that thing's pretty mangly looking. I'm pretty sure if that was thrown at you at a high velocity, it probably hurt pretty bad. So if you know someone who's a bad fisherman, and, you know, the only way they can catch fish is, you know, by shooting them in a barrel, maybe you can make this Bad Fisherman round for him. Once again, it's just some BB split shot encased in wax in the mouth of a 22. Now, this next round we have here, this is called Jeremy's bullet. What am I talking about? One of my coworkers, Jeremy, he said, you know, what you should do is you should take a 22 and just shove a whole bunch of glass in there, maybe put a little bit of metal on top to, you know, kind of cap it off and fire it out of your gun and see what happens. Well, there we go. I kind of worked on it a little bit. It's just a whole bunch of crushed glass in the cartridge of a 22 with a little bit of metal, preferably maybe something like the sidewall of an aluminum can crimped over the top. And basically what we've done is we made a homemade shot shell. So maybe you could scare away some little critters with this round, just a thought. Now, the next round I have here, this is actually a blank. This is for the people who like the whole bunch of noise and fireball effects. This one's called Double Trouble. Back a while ago, a few manufacturers accidentally put twice as much powder into their 22s as they're supposed to. Now, that meant that a few guns were destroyed and many people got injured, so they had to do a recall. But if you want to recreate all that fireball and noise effects without actually damaging your gun, this might be a way to do it. Basically, you pull the bullet off of a 22, you put the powder from another 22 in it, so it's twice as much powder, and then just kind of find a way to cap it off, maybe push a little bit of paper down into the cartridge or super glue a little bit of paper to the top. Anyway, the idea is it's not going to provide enough back pressure so that it's really going to damage your gun, but it's going to provide a really loud fireball show. Now, if you like that round, you want to take it a step further, you could try this one. It's called the Bad Reloader. When people reload, sometimes they do silly things like fill a cartridge completely to the brim with gunpowder and pull a bullet on it, and then they blow up their gun. Well, you can kind of recreate that without hopefully damaging your gun. It's basically just a 22 cartridge filled to the brim with gunpowder, and then with something over the top to cap it off, but not going to provide, once again, that much pressure. And probably what's going to happen is that you're going to get a big fireball, a lot of noise, a lot of unburnt gunpowder is going to end up going down the barrel, and the cartridge is probably going to be chewed up pretty bad, so it might be a problem taking it out. But anyway, that's the idea. The next type of round I have here, this is for those people who like to see some sparks. It's the classic flint-tipped bullet. Back, you know, so many years ago, people started filling up their hollow point rounds with little Zippo lighter flints, just super gluing them to the mouth of the hollow point, and this way when you shoot something like a rock or a piece of metal, it makes a big spark show. Well, you could do the same thing with a 22, just kind of open up the mouth of your hollow point a little bit, super glue that Zippo flint in there, and there you go. That's the classic flint-tipped bullet. This next round has a little bit of history behind it. It's the classic Devastator. The 22 Devastator, if you don't know, it's harder to find them nowadays, but back in the day, they were a pretty interesting round. You know, the idea behind them is that 22 doesn't have that much lethality to it. It still is quite a lethal round, but it's not as lethal as a larger caliber. So the idea is that if you put a little bit of an explosive into the core of a 22, and this is the days before really good 22 hollow points, the idea is that if it hits something with enough amount of mass, something with enough amount of density to it, the round would actually explode. And the explosion of the round would cause an expansion of the wound channel, and it was supposed to increase the lethality of the 22. Now, did these explosive rounds work? No, they didn't really. They're really more or less a novelty, but you could kind of recreate them. You could take a 22 hollow point, open up the mouth again of that 22, and in that cavity put a whole bunch of that Armstrong's mix with the isopropyl rubbing alcohol. Let it solidify, and then you could fire it at a dense target, something like a rock. And then you could see a little bit of maybe like a fireball, a little bit of smoke here, a little bit of a pop. And basically what you've done is made a homemade explosive bullet. So there you go. That's the classic homemade 22 Devastator. So there you go. That's just been an odd showing of some strange 22 caliber bullets I thought of. Take care.